Hey guys, welcome to our channel where we tell incredible stories of transformation, overcoming, and purpose. In today's video, we will learn about the emotional journey of Randall Merrick, a man who, after facing a near-death experience, discovered a new perspective on life and the meaning of his choices. Before we start, I want to know, what city are you watching from? Leave it here in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories. Now, get ready for a story that will touch your heart. My name is Randall Merrick, and looking back, it's almost comical how I used to define myself. I'm just a simple man. Nothing more, I said. It wasn't arrogance, or even false humility. That's how I really saw myself, a speck of dust in an indifferent universe. I was born in Portland, Oregon, and grew up in an average home. My father, Evan, was a Vietnam veteran who believed in hard work and silence. My mother, when she was still around, was more affectionate, but she left us early. Cancer took her when I was 10 years old. It was my father who taught me not to expect anything from the world. Life gives you nothing, Randall. If you want something, take it. These words shaped my worldview. Fast forward a few decades, and I would find myself in a very different place. My job as a civil engineer was functional, at the best of days. I designed bridges, calculated structures, and transformed chaos into order. I liked that, or at least I liked what it represented: control. But in recent years, things have fallen apart. The office has become a battlefield. New colleagues, new bosses, new demands, always more, faster, with fewer resources. Each project was a race against time and, invariably, against myself. Claire, my wife, was a light I didn't know how to see. An art teacher at a public school, she was my opposite in almost every way. Where I saw a blank slate, she saw infinite possibilities. Where I saw problems, she saw opportunities. But our worlds began to collide. "Randall, you're never here," she said. "Not even when he's at home. He's with me." And she was right. I was moving away. I didn't know how to explain the emptiness, the exhaustion. "It's just work," I said, cutting off the arguments. But it wasn't just that. I woke up every day with a growing sense of insignificance. Why fight so hard for things that, in the end, don't matter? Why build bridges when all they do is take people to other places, leaving me behind? One night, after yet another argument with Claire, I sat on the living room couch, staring into space. The rain beat on the windows, rhythmically, almost mocking me. Max, our golden retriever, lay next to me, putting his head on my knee, as if he knew what I was feeling. I stroked his head absently, my mind running in circles. That night, I realized I was no longer in pain, just cold silence. It was as if the part of me that fought had finally surrendered. There was no more energy to move forward. There was no more hope. The next morning, Claire left for work early. His farewell was brief, without emotion. "See you later," she said, but her words were tired. After she left, I walked through the house like a ghost, my footsteps echoing in a space that felt emptier than ever. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey and sat down at the kitchen table. I looked at her for a long time, thinking about all the broken promises that had built up to that moment. Claire and I used to plan our lives together. We were going to travel around Europe, open an art studio for her, and maybe, who knows, have children. But those dreams seemed distant now, like memories from another life. I grabbed the bottle of pills from the drawer. It was a sleeping pill I rarely used, but that morning, it seemed helpful. Max followed me to the couch and lay down next to me again. "You're the only good thing left," I said, voice hoarse. He raised his head, as if listening.
"I'm really sorry about that. In the midst of this darkness, I received an unexpected call. It was my sister, Emily, a doctor who always seemed to have the answer to everything. Randall, you haven't told me in weeks. Everything is fine. I lied, my voice lower than I expected. You don't sound good," she insisted. "Want to have lunch with me?"
Emily was my only true connection other than Claire. But even she seemed so distant, so out of reach. "Maybe," I replied. "I'm kind of busy." "Randall," she sighed, and the call was silent for a few seconds. "If you need me, you know I'm here, right?" I just mumbled something incomprehensible before hanging up. It wasn't true. She was there, but I couldn't reach her. I couldn't reach anyone. The day passed in a blur. When night came, I took the whiskey and pills again. I put Max in bed next to me on the couch and lay down, waiting for silence to finally take over everything. But, as I would soon learn, life, or something beyond it, hadn't given up on me yet. That night began like so many others lately. Steady rain pounding against the windows, the house plunged into an oppressive stillness. Max slept curled up on the rug near the couch, occasionally moving his paws in dreams that were probably more exciting than my waking life. The bottle of whiskey was half empty, and the bottle of pills rested on my lap. I picked up my phone, looking at the screen as if expecting something. Maybe a message from Claire, a reminder that she still cared. But the screen remained blank. My chest felt tight with the same feeling of emptiness that had accompanied me for months. I felt like the internal battle was over. The silence I had feared so much now seemed inviting. As I twirled the pill bottle in my hand, I watched Max lift his head and look at me. His brown eyes seemed to question. "Why are you so quiet?" "You wouldn't understand," I murmured, trying to smile, but my voice came out shaky. He stared at me for a few more seconds before lying down again. In my mind, I began to rationalize what I was about to do. Claire will be better off without me, I thought. Emily is strong. She will overcome. And Max, he has Claire. I repeated these phrases until they started to sound convincing, until I believed them. I opened the bottle and poured some pills into my hand, taking them with a big swig of whiskey. The liquid burned in my throat, but the pain was welcome. When the heat dissipated, I continued, taking more pills. The sensation was that time was slowing down. My limbs began to feel heavy, and my vision became slightly blurred. A part of me expected to feel immediate relief, as if the darkness was embracing me and erasing everything. But that wasn't what happened. Minutes later, I began to feel a growing discomfort in my chest, a pressure that turned into pain. My breathing became difficult. Each breath felt like a Herculean effort. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't respond. The bottle of whiskey fell to the floor, rolling until it hit the foot of the sofa. Max, realizing something was wrong, came to me, licking my face and whimpering. "It's okay, kid," I managed to whisper, but even I knew it was a lie. The last thing I remember was the feeling of imminent fainting. The room seemed to spin around me, the lights getting dimmer and dimmer. Then there was a snap, like the sound of a broken power cable, and everything went dark. It wasn't just physical darkness, but a total absence of sound, light, and sensation. I wasn't sure if I was conscious or just dreaming. Suddenly I realized I was in a completely different space. There was no ground beneath my feet, no walls around me. I was floating in a deep void, a darkness so absolute it seemed alive. My physical body was not there, but I could feel its presence, as if it were a formless consciousness. A low sound began to fill the space, like a distant murmur. I tried to identify where it was coming from, but the darkness seemed limitless. Then something changed. An invisible force began to pull me, like a current in a river, carrying me forward. It was then that I noticed the walls of the tunnel, a viscous, pulsating surface, as if it were alive. As I was led through the tunnel, the voices began to get louder. They were confused whispers, many of them indistinct, but among them, one voice stood out. "Randall." The sound of my name made me freeze, or at least it would have if I had the body for it. I recognized the voice immediately. It was my father, Evan. He passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack, and I have never been able to get over his absence. He was the only person I could really be honest with, even when we disagreed. "Father?" My voice sounded like a thought rather than a sound. "Continue, Randall," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You need to see what lies beyond." I wanted to ask where he was, what was going on, but the words seemed stuck in me. The force pulling me continued, and the voices began to blend again as I was led closer to a bright light at the end of the tunnel. When I finally got close to the light, a wave of warmth and peace enveloped me. It was no ordinary light. It pulsed as if it had a life of its own, radiating an energy that seemed to cut through the darkness around me. Despite its intensity, it didn't hurt my eyes. In fact, it was as if it was calling to me. However, before I got completely closer, I felt something different. The darkness around me began to shift, like a creature trying to pull me back. The light and dark seemed to be in conflict, and somehow I knew my decision mattered. It was as if my thoughts, my emotions, influenced that balance. In the center of the light, I saw a small glowing sphere moving towards me. When she approached, I felt a love so pure and unconditional that tears, or what felt like tears, flowed from me. "Randall," a calm, deep voice spoke, "your journey is not over yet." The light seemed alive. It pulsed, radiating an energy I had never experienced before. It was more than heat or glow. It was pure love, a strength that enveloped every fragment of who I was in that moment. The floating sphere at the center of this light approached slowly, as if analyzing me, but without any trace of judgment. "Randall," the soft, firm voice echoed again, this time from the sphere. "You have reached a point of choice. This is not the end, but a portal to greater understanding. The decision to move forward or return will be yours, but first, you must see." As the sphere spoke, I realized that there was still something around me, the darkness, which now seemed alive, restless, trying to pull me back. It was a cold, suffocating presence, a void filled with promises of desistance and eternal relief. The struggle between light and dark was palpable, as if the environment itself was reacting to what I thought and felt. I wanted to surrender. After everything I'd done, the emptiness I felt, it seemed easier to let the darkness take me. But then, something called me back, a memory of Claire. I remembered the day I met her, her smile as she painted a mural in a community park. The sound of his laughter felt like a cool breeze at that moment, dispelling some of the darkness around me. "Your every thought influences the balance," explained the sphere. "Your choice is being shaped by what you value and fear." I tested the idea. I thought about Max, my dog, waiting for me on the couch. The light around me intensified, pushing away some of the darkness. But when I thought again about my pain, about the failure I felt, the darkness approached again. It was an internal battle that manifested itself externally, and I didn't know if I had the strength to win it. The sphere came closer, its energy expanding around me. From inside it, I saw patterns of colors and shapes that I couldn't explain, as if they were visual representations of universal ideas. When she spoke again, her voice seemed to come from inside me. "You believe you understand life, but what you know is just a layer. Physical existence is a simulation, an illusion created to allow experiences and growth. You are more than a body. You are a multidimensional being." "Multidimensional?" My own voice echoed in the vastness, filled with confusion. "Yes," replied the sphere. "You have existed in many forms and will continue to exist. Death is not an end, but a transition, a door to the next stage of evolution. You are part of a greater whole, connected to everything around you. What you do, think and feel has an impact beyond what you can realize." The words penetrated me like a bomb, and at the same time, a weight. It was a vast concept, much bigger than my skeptical mind was used to processing. I felt like I was understanding something primordial, but I was still struggling to accept it. The light changed again, forming clear images, as if I were watching a giant screen projecting moments from my life. But it was different from watching a movie. I lived moments, feeling every emotion, every consequence. I saw my childhood, my mother's smiling face as she read to me before bed. I felt her loss as if for the first time, the crushing weight of the void left by her absence. I saw my father, tough and reserved, but now I understood that he was trying to teach me how to survive in his own broken way. Then came the hardest moments. Claire, with tears streaming down her face, desperately trying to reach me as I pushed her away with my coldness. I felt your pain as if it were my own. I saw a worried Emily trying to reach me, and I felt her frustration and fear at not being able to reach me. And then, as if it were a final blow, I saw the moment from that night. I saw Max whimpering next to me on the couch, licking my face as I fell apart. I saw Claire arriving home and finding my unconscious body, the horror in her eyes as she called 911. All of that was like a knife going through my heart. I wanted to scream, to apologize, to say that I didn't know how much I was hurting those around me. "You are not just what you did wrong," said the sphere. "You are the sum of all your choices, and you can choose again." Light and darkness around me began to move again. Now, I understood that I was at a decision point. I could head into the unknown, a place that seemed inviting in its promise of rest, or I could return to my life, face the consequences, and try to repair the damage. If you go back, said the sphere, it will not be easy, but you will have the opportunity to grow, to change, to truly love. I thought about Claire, about Emily, about Max. I thought about the lives I'd touched, for better or for worse. I didn't want to be remembered for the suffering I caused. I didn't want to leave just a trail of pain. I want to go back, I declared, my voice echoing in the immensity. I want to try again. The sphere glowed brightly, and then everything disappeared. As the light around me dimmed, I realized I was no longer in the tunnel or surrounded by darkness. Instead, I felt like I was in an infinite space where time and place didn't exist in the way I knew them. It was like being suspended in an ocean of energy. In front of me, a screen of sorts began to form, but it wasn't made of glass or any physical material. It was a projection of my own mind, or maybe something bigger than that. Now you will see the impact of your life, said the sphere of light. His voice was both gentle and firm, like a teacher who knows the lesson will be painful but necessary. I didn't just watch the moments pass before me, I lived them again, with an intensity I hadn't experienced before. I saw myself as a small child, running barefoot in the backyard of my childhood home. My mother was there, sitting in a rocking chair, laughing as I reached for a butterfly. The memory seemed so vivid that I could almost smell the flowers in the air. But then came the day she told me she was sick. I relived the pain of that moment as if it were happening again. She was your anchor, said the sphere. His death left you with a void that shaped many of your choices. I saw my father shortly after she passed away. He transformed from a reserved man into someone who was almost absent. I relived the moments when he taught me how to fix things around the house, but with such a harsh tone that I always felt inadequate. You never saw the love behind his hardness, the orb explained. But it was there. Looking back at my adolescence, I felt the rebellion and confusion again. I found myself withdrawing from people, hiding my feelings behind a facade of self-sufficiency. I relived the moment I decided to study engineering, not because it was something I loved, but because it seemed like a practical and safe choice. You have always sought control, said the sphere, but life can rarely be controlled. This desire for stability has often prevented you from living fully. When the moment of meeting Claire was projected, my heart sank. There she was, painting a mural in the park, her t-shirt covered in paint and her eyes shining with excitement. I had instantly fallen in love. I relived our first meeting, the way she laughed when I nervously dropped my coffee, and how she encouraged me to see the world differently. But the memories have changed. I saw the arguments, the moments when my coldness pushed her away. I felt her frustration again when I avoided talking about my problems. In one particularly heartbreaking scene, I saw Claire alone in the kitchen, with tears streaming down her face, saying, "I feel like I'm married to a ghost." I wanted to scream at her that it was wrong, that I cared, but I knew I couldn't change the past. The sphere showed me moments I had forgotten or ignored. I saw Emily, my sister, trying to connect with me, sending messages I ignored or answering calls only to quickly cut them off. You never realized how much she wanted to help you, said the sphere. There were also scenes with coworkers. I saw how my indifferent attitude influenced the environment around me. A colleague who needed help with a project, but who I ignored, frustrated with my own problems. A meeting where I was rude to an intern who just wanted to learn. Each memory brought a rush of emotions I had never felt before. Not just my own pain, but the pain of the people I had hurt. It was as if I was living their experiences, feeling the direct impact of my actions on them. But it wasn't just moments of pain that appeared. I saw small gestures that I had forgotten, but that had made a difference. The day I helped an elderly neighbor fix his fence. The smile of a child when I returned the ball that had fallen in my yard. Claire's gratitude when I prepared her favorite dish for our wedding anniversary. These moments, said the sphere, show that you are capable of love, of connecting. You just need to remember that. The most painful scene was the night of my suicide attempt. I saw Claire arriving home, finding my unconscious body on the couch. I felt her panic as she called the paramedics, the tears flowing as she screamed, "Don't do this to me, Randall. Please stay with me." I saw Emily receiving the news and the look of despair on her face. Even Max, my dog, was restless, pacing back and forth as if he knew something was terribly wrong. "These are the effects of your choices," said the sphere. "But it's also your chance to do something different." When the review ended, I felt like I had lived an entire life in just a few minutes. I realized that my tunnel vision and desire for control had blinded me to the real impact of my actions. I understood that my choices, no matter how small, had repercussions that went far beyond me. "You can choose to live differently," said the sphere. "Life is made of moments, and each one is an opportunity to love, grow, and connect." I didn't know what was coming, but at that moment, something inside me began to change. The light around me began to change, turning into waves of energy that pulsed with indescribable colors and patterns. The sphere of light that had guided my life review remained before me, shining brightly, but now it felt like it was taking me deeper. The environment, which had previously been static, began to vibrate, as if the very fabric of space was unfolding. "You are more than you believe yourself to be," the sphere said. His voice was calm, but loaded with gravity. "Your soul's journey did not begin with this life. You are a multidimensional being, and your choices in one life shape the path in others." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but before I could question it, a new series of images began to form around me. Only this time, they weren't from my current life. They were different. Suddenly, I was in a wooden boat, surrounded by a vast, churning ocean. The salty smell of the sea filled the air, mixed with the stench of whale oil and wet wood. I looked at my hands and saw deep calluses, marks from years of hard work. I was a whaler, part of a rough and tired crew. The scenes passed quickly, as if I were leafing through a memoir. I saw myself harpooning giant whales, hearing their screams as they fought for their lives. Every time one of them fell, I felt a weight in my chest, a mixture of guilt and inevitability. We were doing this to survive, but I knew on some deep level that it was wrong. One scene in particular stuck with me. The moment a giant whale capsized us, destroying our boat. As the crew fought for their lives, I stood frozen, watching the creature disappear into the depths. She was just protecting her own existence, I thought, before being swallowed by the dark ocean. "This life was marked by the struggle between survival and consciousness," said the sphere. "The weight of your actions followed you, but it also taught you the value of respect for life." The colors around me changed again, and suddenly I was in a field hospital. The sound of distant explosions mixed with the screams of wounded soldiers. I was a woman this time, a nurse with a tired face and blood-stained clothes. My body ached, but I continued working, moving from bed to bed. I saw myself holding the hand of a young soldier who was dying. He was shaking, tears streaming from his eyes as he whispered, "I don't want to die. I want to go home." I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed his hand and stayed with him until his last breath. This life was different. Despite the pain and suffering around me, I felt a deep sense of purpose. "You have learned about sacrifice and compassion," said the orb. "These qualities stay with you, even if you don't fully recognize them." The visions continued, each one showing me a new facet of who I was, or who I had been. I was a wise man in a remote village, helping others resolve conflicts. I was a child who died young, but whose brief existence brought joy to his family. I was a craftsman, a traveler, and even a monk in an isolated temple. Each life seemed to contain lessons, moments of love, pain, courage, and failures. And although they were different, they were all connected in some way. It was as if each lifetime was a piece of a larger puzzle, shaping the person I was now. In one of the visions, I saw a life where I was a rich and powerful man, but completely selfish. I ignored the poor, exploited the weak, and lived only for my own pleasures. When I finally died alone in an empty mansion, I felt the crushing weight of regret. The pain of that existence seemed so strong that I was paralyzed for a moment. "That was one of your hardest lives," said the sphere, "but even darkness contains lessons. This is why you struggle so much with feelings of guilt in this life." When the visions finally stopped, I felt like I was carrying centuries of experiences inside me. I was Randall Merrick, but I was also all those other people. And at the same time, I was more than that. Each life was a rung on a ladder, each lesson a brick in a greater foundation. "You now understand that you are not alone," said the sphere. "Your actions, Choices and learnings in each life impact the whole. You are part of something much bigger than your mind can comprehend. I still had many questions, but I also felt a new clarity. My current existence was just one part of a much larger journey, and even the most difficult moments had a purpose. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. The light around me seemed to pulse with renewed intensity. After reliving so many lives and moments, I felt a clarity I had never experienced before. But at the same time, a new weight settled on me, the weight of the choice that was now before me. The tunnel, the light, the darkness, everything seemed to have led to this point. "Now you understand your connection to everything around you," said the orb, its voice calm, but with a subtle urgency. "Your current journey is not over, but the decision to continue or return is yours." Before I could respond, new images began to form around me. This time, they weren't memories of the past, but glimpses of a future that could have been. I saw Claire, sitting alone in the kitchen, holding my ring in the palm of her hand. Her face was marked by deep lines of sadness. She seemed lost, staring into space as if she were searching for something she would never find again. "You were her heart," said the sphere. "Even when you believed you were worthless, she saw the best in you. His absence will leave a wound that will take years, perhaps decades, to heal." The scene changed to Emily, my sister, organizing my belongings. She looked determined, but also devastated. "I should have done more," I heard her say to herself. The regret in his voice was almost tangible. Then I saw Max, my golden retriever, lying near the front door, waiting for me to enter. Every sound outside made his ears perk up, but when he realized it wasn't me, he lowered his head, dejected. These images were unbearable. The suffering I would cause was not something I wanted to carry, even if I was on another plane of existence. The images changed again, showing another future, one that seemed bright but uncertain. I found myself in the hospital, with Claire holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. I saw Emily, hugging me tightly and saying, "You are not alone. We will get through this together." Later, I saw moments that seemed ordinary, but were full of meaning. A dinner with Claire and Emily, laughter echoing through the room, a walk in the park with Max, his eyes shining with joy, small gestures of love and reconciliation that were both simple and profound. "These moments are still within your reach," said the sphere, "but living requires courage. Returning means facing difficulties, the consequences of your actions, and the uncertainties of the future. Are you willing to carry this burden?" I looked at the light, or maybe I just felt its presence, and for the first time, I found words. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," I admitted. "What if I fail again? What if I can't fix things?" "Failing is part of growth," replied the sphere. "You are not here to be perfect. You are here to learn, to connect, to evolve. What matters is not how far you get, but the intention with which you walk." These words penetrated deeply. The sphere wasn't asking me to be a hero or to solve everything at once. It was just asking me to try, to allow myself to live. I thought about Claire, Emily, and Max again. I thought about the little moments of joy I could still create, the opportunities that were still within my reach. But I also thought about who I was now, in this moment, and realized that something had changed in me. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. "I want to go back," he said finally. My voice was firm but charged with emotion. "I want to try again." The light around me shone brightly, as if celebrating my choice. "Then go," said the sphere. "Live with intention, love with courage. And remember, every moment is an opportunity to start again." Suddenly I felt a tug, as if I was being ripped out of that space of energy. The colors and light disappeared, replaced by darkness. But this darkness was not empty. There were distant sounds, human voices, hurried footsteps, the beeping of machines. My body came back to life abruptly. I felt a crushing pain in my chest, as if something was pushing me back into consciousness. My hands were shaking, my head was throbbing, and my breathing was shallow and labored. But I was alive. I heard a familiar voice calling my name. It was Claire. "Randall, please stay with me," she begged. When I opened my eyes, I saw her face, pale and full of tears. She held my hand so tightly that she seemed afraid I would disappear again. "I'm here," I managed to say, my voice hoarse and barely audible. Opening my eyes was like emerging from a deep, suffocating abyss. The first thing I felt was pain, an unbearable pain in my chest, as if something was pressing my soul into my body again. The sound around me was chaos, muffled voices, hurried footsteps, the constant beeping of machines. My head was pounding, and each breath felt like a monumental effort. But I was alive. The bright ambient light blinded me, and for a moment, all I could see were moving shadows. One of those shadows approached, and then I heard her voice, Claire's voice. "Randall, can you hear me?" There was a desperation in his tone, but also a strength. I tried to respond, but my throat felt dry and my voice felt stuck. With effort, I managed to mutter, "Claire." She leaned over me, holding my hand tightly. His eyes were swollen from crying, and his pale face reflected the tiredness of hours of waking. "You're back," she whispered, her voice broken by sobs. "Oh my God, you're back." Little by little, the environment began to make sense. I was in a hospital room, surrounded by machines that monitored my vital signs. A paramedic in the background was talking to a doctor, explaining how they had found me at the last minute. His wife called quickly, he said. If she had arrived a little later, the words weren't completed, but I knew what they meant. Claire had found me and called for help, and that decision saved my life. I looked at her again, and her face looked like a mix of relief and hurt. "Why did you do that, Randall?" she asked, tears still streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me you were so bad?" I didn't know how to respond. How could I explain something that I didn't even fully understand? But something inside me knew I needed to be honest. I was lost, I managed to say. "I didn't want you to carry my weight." "Your weight?" Claire shook her head, pain evident in every movement. "I wanted to carry it with you, Randall. I always wanted to, but you pushed me away." As Claire spoke, I heard rapid footsteps outside the room. The door opened and Emily walked in, her professional doctor face now crumbling in pure relief. She came straight to my bed, leaning down to hug me gently. "Randall, you're an idiot," she said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "You almost killed us with worry." "Sorry, Emily," I murmured. No excuses now," she interrupted me, holding my shoulders firmly. "You will recover, and then we will have a serious talk about all this. But right now, I'm just glad you're still here." I saw tears in her eyes, a rare thing from her, and I felt an overwhelming weight of guilt and gratitude at the same time. Despite everything, she was still by my side. The next day, after the doctors assessed my condition and said I was out of danger, Claire brought Max to the hospital. As soon as he entered the room, his tail started wagging frantically, and he ran straight to my bed. He climbed in carefully, as if he knew I was fragile, and placed his head in my lap. "Hey, kid," I whispered, running my hand through his soft fur. Max looked at me with those deep brown eyes, full of unconditional love. "I'm sorry for scaring you." He didn't respond, of course, but the way he stood by me, as if protecting me, made me feel like he had forgiven me, perhaps faster than I would have forgiven myself. The following days were difficult. My body was still weak from the overdose, and the doctors emphasized the need for psychological support. Claire and Emily were determined to make sure I got the help I needed, but there was something different this time. I didn't feel the weight of their judgment, just love and genuine concern. In the first session with the therapist, I talked about the feeling of emptiness that led me to that night. I talked about my struggle with the idea of purpose and connection, but I didn't mention my near-death experience. It wasn't because I didn't believe her, but because I was still trying to process what had happened. One night, while I was still in the hospital, Claire sat next to me while I slept. When I woke up, I found her holding my hand. His eyes were fixed on me, as if he was trying to understand what had changed. "I thought I lost you," she said, her voice low. "But now that you're here, I want to know if we can start over." I looked at her, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "I want to try," I replied. "If you're willing, I want to try to make things right this time." She smiled, although her eyes still sparkled with tears. "I've always been willing, Randall. I just needed you to be too." Returning to the body was not just a physical recovery. It was a call to something greater, an opportunity to live, to love, to try again. I didn't know what the future would be like, but for the first time in a long time, I was willing to find out. Returning to my body was just the beginning. It wasn't like opening my eyes and suddenly becoming a different person. What happened during my near-death experience changed something fundamental within me, but bringing those changes into the real world was a challenge. My mind still carried the old patterns, the skepticism, the fear, the guilt, but now there was something more, a thin thread of hope, a spark that told me I could do things differently. The first few days at home were silent. Claire tried not to pressure me, but her concern was evident in every gesture. She cooked my favorite meals, stayed with me on the couch while I watched TV, and even canceled some classes to spend more time with me. Max, as always, was at my side every step of the way, as if he feared I would disappear if he looked away. Despite all this support, my mind was overwhelmed. The experience I had outside my body haunted me at every moment, especially at night. I dreamed of the sphere of light, of the dark tunnel, of the past lives that I relived. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, feeling again the weight of the choices I made in that dimension. One of those nights, Claire found me in the living room, sitting in the dark. "Randall, what's going on?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I hesitated. How could I explain something so indescribable? But then I remembered the sphere's words: live with intention, love with courage. If I wanted to change, I needed to start by being honest. I saw something. When I was unconscious, I began, my voice wavering, something that made me realize that my life cannot continue as it was. She sat next to me, holding my hand. "What did you see?" "I've seen it my whole life," I replied. "I saw how my choices, or lack thereof, affected you, Emily, and everyone around me. I saw lives I lived before this one, and it was as if everything had led me to this moment. And I realized that if I had left, I would have left a trail of pain that I cannot justify." Claire was silent for a long time, absorbing my words. Finally, she said, "Randall, this is the beginning. That's what I needed, for you to let me in." The relationship with Claire was the first focus of my transformation. Before, I had closed myself off so much that I didn't realize how much she was trying to help me. Now, with a new perspective, I began to pay attention to the little details I had previously ignored. The way she arranged her brushes after painting, the soft sound of her laughter when she saw something that amused her, the patience with which she waited for me, even when I pushed her away. I started making small changes, simple things like asking about her day, helping with the dishes after dinner, or accompanying her on her morning walks in the park. These gestures, although small, began to create a bridge between us. One night while we were having dinner, she looked at me and said, "You're really here, aren't you?" I smiled, for the first time in a long time, feeling like I was starting to be the person she deserved. "I'm trying, Claire. Thank you for not giving up on me." My sister was the next person I reconnected with. Emily was always the strongest among us, but my suicide attempt left deep scars on her. One day, after weeks of trying to contact her, I decided to call. "Randall," she answered on the second ring. "Are you well?" "I'm better," I replied. "I wanted to apologize, Emily, for everything, for not listening to you before, for pushing you away." She was silent for a moment, but her voice was soft as she replied, "Randall, you are my brother. No matter what happened, I will always be here. But we need to work on this together." Since that day, I've made a conscious effort to include her more in my life, visit her regularly, ask her about her work, and, most importantly, listen to her concerns. This connection brought a sense of stability that I didn't know I needed. One of the biggest changes I experienced was the way I began to see my purpose. Before, my life was defined by work deadlines and material achievements. Now I realized that these things were just tools, not the end in themselves. I started looking for ways to make a difference, even if on small scales. Claire encouraged me to volunteer at a local homeless shelter, where I helped repair building structures and interacted with people facing even greater challenges than I did. Every conversation, every smile seemed to rekindle something inside me, a connection to humanity that I had lost. I also started drawing again, something I did in college but abandoned when my career began. Claire helped me set up a small space in our basement where I could work on personal projects. They weren't great works of art, but the process of creating something brought me a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Although I was still skeptical about organized religion, my out-of-body experience made me question my long-held beliefs. I started reading about spirituality, meditation, and the concept of universal consciousness. One day, I sat with Claire in the backyard and told her about the sphere of light. I explained how she showed me the impact of my actions, how I reviewed my past lives, and how it changed my perception of existence. "Looks like you found something bigger," she said, smiling. "You don't need to give it a name. Just let it guide you." I incorporated meditation practices into my routine, using them as a way to connect with my new understanding of the universe. These practices helped quiet my restless mind and focus on the present. In the end, the transformation wasn't about changing who I was completely, but about acknowledging my flaws and making conscious choices to be better. The sphere of light had taught me that life is a gift, not perfect, not easy, but incredibly valuable. Now, every day is an opportunity to live with intention, to love with courage, and to create meaningful connections. And although I still have moments of doubt and struggle, there is a part of me that knows, unshakably, that I am on the right path.